I'm excited about my haircut.
How are you getting a haircut these days,
I
Carl?
have to drive to Rockland County, New York. They just opened this week, and I found a place that will do it like one person at a time.
You got to do what you got to do. Like the Beatles look, it's kind of working for you.
I don't know, almost 60, so.
The last time I saw you, I was sitting next to you on a plane. So, Carl Fremont, I have to say this to you. Come fly with me. Let's fly away.
God, has the world changed since then?
I know.
Totally. It was a great pleasure sitting next to you for the entire ride and talking about the industry and our backgrounds. I so much enjoyed it. And who would know that the world would turn upside down since we last were on that plane ride?
That's right. And I think we all do this. Like, oh, that was the person that I had my last restaurant meal with. And now we're talking about you having to drive miles to be the one person in a hair salon to get a haircut.
Our industry has changed too.
Hey, it's E.B. Moss, and this is episode 11 of Insider Interviews. My guest today is Carl Fremont, a man with almost 40 years of experience in the media and marketing industry. He also has a reputation for bringing people together, both from a digital and a diversity perspective. He was responsible for aligning two WPP powerhouses, Wavemaker and Wonderman. He was the global chief digital officer at MEC, where he collaborated on transformations to more digitally centric marketing strategies. But he also sits on a lot of nonprofit advisory boards. And he's the chairperson emeritus of the Ad Club of New York, where under his leadership, they launched their Women's Fellowship Program and diversity initiatives. Now, Carl often spends a lot of time flying back and forth between LA and New York because he's now the CEO of Quigley-Simpson. But during this era, he's home like a lot of us doing a lot of Zoom meetings. So that's where I caught him, surrounded by a lot of vintage radios. But that's another story you'll hear in this episode. Carl Fremont, you're kind of a lucky guy because your core competency is literally being known for creating transformational business plans. So you stepped into a brand new role like 10 months ago, and it's been nothing but transformation foisted upon you. How are you doing?
You know, on one side, business is great because, as you said, there's more demand today for alternative channels to distribute and sell products. On the other hand, our world has turned upside down, and feel very bad about all of the people infected with COVID-19. I've had it in my circle and had someone pass in my circle. So it's really mixed, to be honest. It's a mixed emotion that we're all going through today. We can't ignore the outside world and all the unrest around racism and COVID-19 is on one hand. But on the other hand, I love transformation. And I love the fact that things are changing and evolving. That's the good. There's two sides of what we're going through. There's the euphoria that business is evolving and changing. But at the same time, there's a heavy weight on the world and what's happening. So you try and look at the positives, because that's me. I'm always a glass half full kind of guy. And that I've been through so many other transformations in the almost 40 years that I've been in the business, that to me, this is just another one. And I believe that the transformation to more alternative distribution and sales channels other than retail was already happening before the COVID-19 situation. It's just been accelerated more. So we were on that path already. And let me just say, EB, that path has been for well over 20 years.
I want to jump in, Carl, and give people a little bit of backstory about that 20 years, because you have such a unique perspective, having been at some of the biggest holding companies in the world and now at Quigley-Simpson. I'm going to put you in the hot seat and say, having gone from WPP, et cetera, you joined them as their first CEO in quite a few years. Why them?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, Quigley-Simpson, I like to say, is one of the original DTC companies. And why I say that is because we've been practicing direct to consumer ever since the company was founded. We just didn't call it direct to consumer. We called it direct marketing. And I don't know when and at which point direct marketing changed to direct to consumer. Similarly, I don't know when acquisition marketing changed to performance marketing. So, we've been practicing the direct to consumer skills since our founding. And myself, going back almost 40 years, I've been in the direct marketing business. And direct marketing to me, and we'll get into it a little bit later, EB, does not mean you abandon brand and you just marketing performance. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And I'd like to park that for a minute and go through my journey in history, as you had just asked, and get back to that. For me, I saw early on in my career that marketing needed to be more accountable. I remember when I started doing packaged goods advertising for General Food, so I'm really going to date myself there, way before it was sold to Kraft. I always were asking the brand managers, how was sales last year? And how was it from the year before? And there was so little accountability to the marketing, advertising investments. And as a media guy, I was in charge of all those media investments, not as many channels as we have today. And felt that something was missing. I then moved to Wunderman Agency. At the time, it was called Wunderman, Ricotta and Klein, for those who remember it. I thought it was a law firm, actually. And I said I would stay for a year in direct marketing, and I stayed for 16. And the reason I did is because I was bitten by this notion of results, and that results informed my decisioning, my strategy, my media. And I just thought that was an amazing skill and opportunity to have, to look at actual performance, how our advertising was responded to and at a granular level, and be able to make adjustments based on that to improve business outcomes. And that's why I stayed 16 years. But I was also fortunate, EB, to work with one of the founders in the direct marketing industry, Lester Wunderman, and a great, great pioneer of the time. And he took simple marketing challenges, such as micropayments, and invented. He was an inventor. He was an entrepreneur and an inventor, and came up with the notion of a payment card, American Express, early on. And so many of the foundational things today we take for granted in marketing, like accepting a credit card, like even a zip code, a continuity club, all of those principles from that he founded the company on still exist today and are still important. As a matter of fact, Lester wrote a book in 1989 called Being Direct. I highly recommend to your audience that you read it. When you open it up, it's the 19 principles of direct marketing. I swear, EB, every solitary one of those, and it was written 30 years ago, still applies today.
Oh, that's awesome, Carl. I'll add a link in the show notes.
So Being Direct by Lester Wunderman, I've given it out to my clients and said, these are the same principles. For me, in my journey, it was always about business outcomes and improving business performance. And that's where I stayed. And after Wunderman, I realized the next evolution was in digital. And so in 2000, 20 years ago, I moved to Digitas. It was a independent, very advanced digital agency whose legacy was very similar to Wunderman in direct marketing, but had advanced themselves in digital. And I knew in 2000, even though the bubble hadn't burst yet, that that was the next frontier. And I had to jump in the same way I jumped into direct marketing. I needed to jump into the next frontier, which was digital, data and digital. And I like to always say that today we are doing direct marketing as we did 20 years ago and 30 years ago. It's enabled more and more dynamic through the access of data and technology. So all the core principles of direct marketing and marketing in general have not changed. What has changed is the access to data and technology to evaluate the data, to cull insights from the data, to use that data in more real time for more precise marketing.
I think that I read that Quigley-Simpson sort of represents all of those pathways in one shop. Is that part of your rationale for picking them?
Yes. Honestly, after spending the majority of my career in a holding company setting, and there's lots of benefits for that, and I'm not going to say anything against the holding company model, but I will say by having all of the services integrated together, media, data, analytics, creative, user experience, web development, means that we can create a more harmonious consumer experience and path to purchase. And that is what I was seeking because in a holding company environment, it is so fragmented that time you pull all the pieces together across multiple agencies, your opportunity has passed and it becomes clunky, to be honest. But for me, what was appealing about Quigley-Simpson, one, the heritage of the company, similar to mine as an original direct to consumer company. The people within it, certainly the co founders, Renee Hill and Gerald Beck, share my direct marketing DNA and enthusiasm, and the rest of the senior leadership as well. And doing that in an integrated environment where we're independent, where we make our own decisions and then apply them is so exciting and rewarding to me. And the work that we're doing that enables what we like to say brand and demand, and I'll bring that back now, is also a big part of it.
Well, before you bring that back, which I'm really interested in, I want to do a little bit more of a treetops and then we'll drill down a little bit. We kicked off this conversation joking about needing haircuts as if that's our biggest problem, right? But the fact is that it is definitely business unusual these days. And we do have a triple threat against us and against brand health. Our mid pandemic, and I think we're hearing that the curve is re-arcing again, even though many businesses are hungering to get back to business as usual. We've certainly got a charged red and blue political climate right now, pre election. And we're really trying now to put our big boy pants on in this country and solve our considerable race relations issues and diversity issues. From that treetops perspective, how can brands first stop their bleeding and then show what they stand for without disenfranchising their customers?
Great question.
And it's a tough question.
It's a very tough question. I don't think there's any simple answer, to be honest. I wish I did, but from my perspective and our perspective, Quigley-Simpson, to answer the first one around brands and their perspective and in this, I believe that you need to always be authentic and you need to be true to what the brand is and what it stands for. When I look across when COVID-19 happened and now with the race issues that are surfacing, they've always been there, but are surfacing. And I see a number of brands who have jumped into the fray. I think it's disingenuous, to be honest, and it's not authentic to them. And I believe that consumers see through that. And why now all of a sudden, rather than making that part of your being and part of the brand and the brand principles and what the brand stands for all along? And so it feels disingenuous when brands just jump right into it with messaging that doesn't connect to the brand at all, and is my belief and my failing. So make it authentic, make it always part of the brand's DNA to begin with. That's what we recommend and form our clients to do, to always be authentic. But the other thing about brands and this environment today, on your first question, is really about alternative marketing and distribution and sales strategies. And we talked about that in a bit earlier on. And it's being accelerated. It was always there, it was starting before, and that most brands need to look at alternative channels and platforms to sell through, whether that be through a major e-commerce platform or building your own e-commerce platform. That is something that we advise our clients and help them with as well, is that you can certainly test direct to consumer and e-commerce through an established platform. The challenge with that is you don't own the consumer and you don't own the experience.
You're giving up all of that data and knowledge to a third party otherwise.
And the consumer experience. So the way in which they interact and engage with the brand on a third party e-commerce platform is not yours. And you don't have, as we just said, the data in which to segment the audiences in terms of their prior behavior, what they purchased in the past. So all of that drives incrementality in sales. So unless you own that experience and the data, it's hard to drive that incrementality. You will hit a wall. We advise to use all channels and optimize all. You should absolutely look at a third party platform for distribution, but recognize there's limitations. The benefit of a third party e-commerce platform is obviously the scale. They drive tremendous scale. You don't have to advertise necessarily to drive there. If you have your own e-commerce platform, you have to drive the scale, which means you have to invest not only in the platform, but in the social marketing, search marketing, programmatic marketing in order to drive the scale. But the benefits are tremendous because you own the data and you own the consumer experience. And then you can always upsell and market to them post-purchase.
Is there any kind of middle ground, or do you have to kind of go one way or the other?
Well, you can certainly start and test into a third-party platform just to measure whether there's an opportunity, what initial consumer response will be. It's a low risk situation. And then move yourself slower to that. Now, many brands will say they have their own platform on their own website, but that's not necessarily going to draw people in either because they may not know that you can buy direct through their website. And the website doesn't necessarily always represent their interest or their lifestyles. So it's almost better to develop a separate e-commerce platform outside of your brand so that you can draw people in from an interest and a lifestyle level and not just a brand information level.
Certainly, Quigley-Simpson has a brand and demand position. And I've also heard you use the phrase live lab. How do those two things sort of take you from the goal of branding to the tactical implementation? And what are they?
That's a great question. And when I came, we developed at Quigley-Simpson that value proposition of brand and demand, meaning that it is equally as important to focus on the brand as well as it is on the performance. And if you only focus on driving awareness of a brand, that path to purchase is a long one. And our goal with brand and demand is to shorten the purchase from brand interest, brand association, brand consideration, and purchase. If you just focus on one end of the spectrum, as I said, brand, that's a long journey then to get you to purchase. If you only focus on the purchase cycle, you may not have a brand association and need then to build that association for somebody to have intent to purchase. So it is about creating that intent to purchase through a brand association and connection, and then shortening that distance, allowing them easy access to the brand and purchase. And that's what we do best. And it is taking decades and decades of sharpening that, our tools in our DTC direct marketing background to do that. But we will never abandon the brand. The brand and its association are critical parts of the ecosystem for purchase. And that's why we shorten the difference. And in that lab, as you had mentioned, it's about testing and learning, certainly capitalizing on everything we've learned over 20 years working with big brands, working with startup brands. We work with all types of brands and understanding how to shorten that purchase journey.
Can you give us a case study example? What's Quigley-Simpson most proud of these days?
We're proud of a lot, but take a brand that is, and I don't like to say a particular name, because I don't want to be giving away.
You love all your children equally.
Exactly. But one that is focused on beauty and started as a direct to consumer brand, but is also sold at retail. So, how do you manage both? And how do you look at the attribution that one drives of the other? And EB, what's really important today is the data analytics and being able to look at the attribution that one has of the other. When we use the word omnichannel, and it's an often used word and term, it doesn't mean just multiple channels. It means measuring and understanding the impact that one channel, a paid media, might have on another channel like retail and vice versa. We're living in an omnichannel world. As we've been talking about, there's a greater speed and path to direct to consumer today, whether you're a well established brand in, let's say, packaged goods, or whether you're a new brand and new to direct to consumer, you've got to go both ways. We're audio, so you don't see that my hands are going in both directions.
You look a little bit like the scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz right now.
Well, I told you I'm getting a haircut later. It will look better. It will look better.
I meant the hands, okay. Carl, going in either direction. The hair's fine.
In any event, omnichannel means that you need to look at it holistically and look at what all your channels do together on a bottom line and how do you optimize the performance in each individual channel. What a lot of brands do, and I think what they get wrong, to be honest, is they have channel managers for a single siloed channel to optimize, but they don't look at the impact and effect that each channel has on the other. So by that, I mean, if you're doing television and DRTV, we are well known for and have a big foundation of our company. What impact does DRTV have in search and social? We've seen it has a major impact in driving web traffic when you do DRTV. But likely, same thing is that TV alone can drive direct sales. But you've got to look at it holistically. And why do you need to look at it holistically? Because of consumer behavior. And no one shops that way. No one says that, well, I saw it on television, I must respond on TV, and that's it. Just think of ourselves. We are multi-channel in our behavior, in our brand consideration and our brand purchases. We do it online, we do it offline. We're influenced by multiple channels. So we have to learn and understand and apply the impact that multi-channels have on each other. And that's what we do. I think that's our secret sauce. One of our secret sauces is understanding that and then applying it in both media and in creative.
Well, you used a word there and it actually teed me up beautifully, although you couldn't know it, although you're pretty good at having a crystal ball. You mentioned the word influence. And I'm just looking at everything that's going on these days and consumers buying less and some of the tone deaf approaches of influencers. And I really wanted your prognostication. I mean, you're kind of known as a visionary also. Like, what do you think is going to happen with bona fide influencers? They act so aspirational. Do you think that that's forget about it now or just a temporary hold?
I have a strong opinion on influencers.
Oh, I'm so excited. Okay.
Brought it up. I
Go for it.
That just because someone has a following doesn't mean they're necessarily right for the brand. What I would love to see happen, and I put that challenge out to your listeners, and I hope somebody does it, because I've been talking about it for a while, anyone in influencer marketing to develop a Q score, similar to what we have in television or in through other channels, that known celebrities have a Q score to understand they're fit for the brand. They may have a very strong following. They may have a strong likability, but they don't necessarily have a strong brand fit. We don't have that today. We don't. And therefore, you're taking a big leap that someone, because they're a celebrity, they have notoriety, and they have a large follower base, is right for the brand. That's a scale issue. That's not necessarily a brand fit issue. So we need to, I believe, have a better metric for understanding the fit that an influencer, a so-called influencer, even the term I have a problem with. How do I know that they're really influencing on a brand's choice unless they have authenticity and they have direct experience that's really authentic to the brand, and there's some type of Q score that we can use to measure the fit that a known celebrity or a known influencer, quote unquote, has for a brand. So I put that challenge out to the market that we develop a Q score. I'm happy to help and advise anyone in that. I put that out there and nobody's picked up the gauntlet.
I'm going to amplify it, Carl. Be prepared. And if you want to put your phone number out there, no, kidding. People can find you. But that's sort of parallel to what you said earlier, that awareness alone doesn't cut it. And that's kind of what an influencer is.
Exactly. It's not that I'm against the principle of it. I just feel like we need to make sure that it's the right brand engagement and the right brand fit.
Yeah. I don't know. It just feels to me personally a little icky in today's environment. That is a professional term, by the way, icky.
Maybe we need an icky score.
That's true, to counter the Q. Speaking of authentic leadership and influence, one of the things I'm going to give you absolute applause for is some of the work that you've done with diversity and inclusion. I know that that is part of the Quigley-Simpson brand DNA, but it's been that way even before you got there. So I'm glad you found a good home for that. But for many years, Carl, you were a mentor and very involved with She Runs It. You've been on the advisory board of breastcancer.org. Certainly, your involvement in the Ad Council has influenced a lot of public service messaging. Tell me about the soft side of you.
If you can see me, there's a lot of soft side. But in addition to that, I always believe we need to take a human approach to whatever we do. And that early on has always guided me, is to be yourself, to be authentic, and to help people. The greatest pleasure I've gotten in my career is not only how to market brands and how to be effective with brands, but it's also how to mentor and guide people in their career. Nothing makes me happier. And I never say no. Maybe that's not a good thing, but I never say no. And it's because I didn't really have a mentor in my career. I looked up to a lot of people, but I did it on my own. And I always said, I need to give back. I need to pay that forward. And I need to help people in their career development. And it's hard today. And I have a young daughter, 25, who's in this industry, even though I did not encourage her to do so. But I see that so much has changed over the 40 years when I started. And I think now more than ever, young people and people in mid part of their career need some guidance. And I always say, stay true to who you are and don't do anything that doesn't feel good and right for you. So I've always liked to pay it forward, always believe in it, but also believe that we need to, in our industry, we are marketing to such a diverse group of people. And thank God, the country is a diverse country and made up of so many different backgrounds that add so much to the vibrancy of this country. That's who we're marketing to. But you look at the people and the landscape of the people who are marketing to that diverse group, and it's not so diverse. And therefore, we need to always make sure that we're giving opportunities, that we're mentoring, that we're helping to grow the industry in a more diverse background. If it's all the same, then we're talking to ourselves. We've got to talk to a diverse group and therefore have a diverse conversation. And our advertising needs to represent that diverse group of people as well.
How are you advising your clients that way? I mean, it's one thing for you to hire for and provide diverse creatives and integrated perspectives so that the content and creative reflects a diverse audience. Do you ever run into stumbling blocks with brands in trying to convince them or help them understand best practices?
It's a great question. I believe that there's an awakening that is happening that has been slowly direct to consumer. It's been slow to adoption, but now will really drive us forward. So I believe and I hope there's some good that comes out of the recent events around race relations and understanding that, and that marketers will be awoken to it in an authentic way. So, how to be authentic? Authentic isn't just saying you support a particular cause. Being authentic is showing it. It is that your advertising represents the diversity of this country and is natural. It doesn't feel forced. So I advise any brand, any marketer to be that authentic. Don't just put messaging out there that's sympathetic. Live it. The brand should live it, and they should show in the advertising and the messaging diverse backgrounds of people. That's the only way we're going to change things.
So, just to kind of wrap things up in our conversation about advertising, I can see through my webcam over your shoulder that you have some vintage ads on the wall behind you and a cupboard of amazing vintage radios. I recognize one of the radios in your cupboard that I had as a little girl.
It's interesting. So I love vintage and I love looking back and looking forward. So we spent the past 30 minutes or so talking about looking forward. But I believe a lot of lessons can be obtained about moving forward from looking back. I've surrounded myself with not only new technology, but past technology. And radios to me, and there's a interesting personal story behind it, represent at one point in time a new technology, right? And we had print, there was no video, and radio came about, the audio, and being able to talk and express not only content, programming, but also in a non static way with voice, but also with advertising. You could express the brand very differently. And brands back in 80 years ago or more were grappling with this new medium, like we did in the early days of internet, of digital 20 years ago when I said it. The same challenges that we had around measurement. How do I know the radio ads are effective? Are they driving people to Macy's or not? Are people listening and being impacted by the messaging? How long should the length of the commercial be? All of those issues back then, we're still grappling with today. So taking a look back informs us for a look forward. On a personal level, I started collecting vintage radios from the 1910s all the way through the 1970s because of the design. While I'm very analytical, I'm also very creative. And early radios had such an amazing design to them. And then through the war, when they were made pre war only out of wood, and then there was a period that we were not making radios in the United States because of the war, World War II, of course. And then post, when plastic was really coming into being in the 1950s, and Bakelite, the type of plastic, was used in radios. I started collecting them from the design, and I didn't understand why I had, in addition to the marketing and the advertising and the design, what was my attachment to radios? And one day, my dad, who's passed now, said to me, I noticed you're collecting radios. Did you know that I manufactured radios in Argentina? My father came to this country from Argentina. So I myself come from a diverse background and diverse cultural background. I said I did not know. And he showed me his advertising for his radios that he made in Buenos Aires. His plastics company was nationalized during the Perón years. And then that's when he came to America. But here comes his son, almost 40 years later, having an interest in radios, which is what he manufactured. And he saved his ad for the radio, which I have framed. And I've been to Buenos Aires many times. And I brought with me the ad, and I brought it around to stores, the ads, asking if anyone had seen that vintage radio. Everyone said no. But I gave my information to all the store owners. Wouldn't you know it, a week after I returned from Buenos Aires, I get a call from an antique dealer who found my father's radio. My family from Argentina was coming to America, and they picked it up and then brought it to me. So after over 50 years, I'm reunited with what my dad made in Argentina.
That's incredible.
That solidified my journey because I didn't understand why that was so important. I knew from a marketing and advertising side and design, but from a personal side, where did that interest come from?
You need the genetics detective to understand the hobby. I love that story. Carl, you're going to love me a little bit more. I'm going to tell you one brief thing, and then this might turn into a whole other podcast. My great aunt, I'm just going to say, kind of carried on with, and as a radio guy, you would know this name, Lee DeForest,
Oh, wow.
the inventor of the vacuum tube,
Yes.
which made radio possible.
Absolutely.
And I have some heated letters from Lee DeForest to my aunt. So that is my mother's side.
When you just said that.
Yeah, me too. And my dad, of course, was in radio. He was the first radio major at Ithaca College. So that's why we had quite a lot of vintage radios. And I'll send you a photo as well. So, yep, exactly.
Circle. It's a circle for me.
It is.
For you.
The circle of life. See, and then we completely bookended the podcast with singing. I got to stop that, man. All right, Carl Fremont, CEO of Quigley-Simpson. What an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on Insider Interviews.
So enjoyed our time together.